Hi, and welcome again to another session at the Passion to Profit Summit. I'm so excited to be here with Brandon Hakim today, who is all about books, and he's read thousands of books. And especially as an entrepreneur, it is so important and such a great tool to use books to educate yourself and to really fine-tune your business strategy. All these experts have, you know, put all their expertise and their wisdom and their learning and bundle them up into so many different books that we can then take to dive into and really take those experiences and apply them to our lives and dissect what they have done and see how that works for us. So we don't have to go through that same learning curve. So welcome to the panel.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And before we dive in, let me introduce you a little bit more to the audience, because you've got quite an interesting, fun journey as well as your background. So Brandon is on a mission to give you the education that you will never get in school. When he was going to college, he went into the dean's office and kind of complained that he thought his education was quite outdated and paying a lot of money for that as well. But the dean just suggested that they were working on it, but that wasn't good enough for you. So you started to read books, and one book turned into two turned into four, and then into 1,000. And since then, you've helped over 410,000 people to learn faster, work more efficiently, and download the wisdom from thousands of books into their brains in a fraction of the time that it would take to read a book on its own. So I'm super excited to hear how you can turn a book, because I'm such a slow reader, and I know we'll go into this afterward a little bit later, because I'm dying to know how to get more information into my brain, because I think it's such a valuable asset that we have access to, and it's not expensive to read a book. Time is probably more expensive than the book itself. So I can't wait to hear on how we can maximize our time and still downloading all the wisdom. But before we go into that, I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey, because I know you went into entrepreneurship straight after uni. Was that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you kind of more fall into that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually, right out of college, I was running a restaurant, and that was the first thing I was doing. And then I started insider school simultaneously towards the end of that. Really, there's a tiny bit of overlap. But I always knew I wanted to do something that was an expression of who I was and what I was experiencing inside, but I wasn't quite sure where that would lead me.
That is, I think, so often the case when people understand, and I know that was the case for me as well, like knowing that there's something I wanted to do, but I couldn't figure it out for a long time. And you managed to get there a lot quicker. But I think a lot of people struggle with that internal knowing that there's something else that they want to do, but not knowing what that is. So how did you get there? How did your journey evolve?
One of the most impactful things I learned in college, I was studying abroad and I got really sick. So I was home in my apartment for 2 weeks, and my roommate gave me this business training to watch. It was like a 24-hour training. I think it was 12 videos that are around 2 hours each. And in one of the first videos, if not in the first one, the guy's up there in the front, it's a recording of a seminar. And he says you have to realize the difference between creation and discovery. He says you're going to start creating something, but almost always your real success is going to come on something you discover along the way after you start creating.
That is such a great point.
And for me, it really stuck with me, and that's been something that I've found to be very true in my own life, but it's also something that I think about in terms of moving forward, that it's actually more important to pick something and get into action and be open to what I will discover along the way, instead of sitting in my room and thinking about what is the right thing to do.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I work a lot with my clients because sometimes they feel like they need to have it all figured out. But it really comes down to just actually going for it. And then one thing will lead to another and it will evolve from that. And you couldn't have even figured that out by just sitting back and waiting.
Right.
I love that. Yeah. So how did you take that forward?
Well, for me, it was starting with the restaurant. And then I have a call with a friend, a mastermind call every week. And when I was in college, I had written this book on how to get good grades in less time. And he said, why don't you just turn that into a course and put it online? And I said, okay, great. I'm going to have that done by next week. So I spent a full week. I lost my voice. I barely ate. I got really sick for the 2 weeks after, but I got the course done in a week and it was live. And, the first people started signing up for it. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then I thought I have nothing else to share with people. So that was the end of my online journey. And then one day I had the inspiration to, you know what? My goal is to read 300 books this year. What if I made a course called Read 300 Books this year? Become a learning machine, read 300 books this year. And it literally just a flash of inspiration, and I acted on it that same day. I wrote the outline, and then by that weekend, I had recorded the course. And as soon as I put it up online, I was getting such good feedback for it, and hundreds of people were signing up. And then again, I was like, all right, I have nothing else to do. But then people started asking for my book recommendations. So then I started sharing those through email, and then I started making other courses with my favorite lessons from all these books I'm learning. So just one thing led to the next.
As it always does.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. So how long have you been on this journey and how has it evolved? What has it turned into now? And what is your kind of favorite part of it now, from, starting to read books to tell us more what it is?
Yeah, so I started the journey of making online courses in December 2014. That's when I released that first course on beating college, getting good grades in less time. And from there, I would just, release course after course. It wasn't like an intense thing or something that I was, um, trying to release as many as possible. But only over the last few years, I had this insight. I think an important lesson that I learned from my experience, but also from books like The Slight Edge, The Compound Effect, The Power of Habit, Atomic Habits, so forth, is I like to think of life like a water bucket. And the goal in every area of life is to fill up your water bucket. And that's whatever success looks like to you in that area. But the thing is, we think that, okay, I want to fill up that bucket all at once. But the thing is, whenever you do that, you're going to fail. Unlike a regular water bucket, we could just fill up with a hose. This water bucket of life needs to be filled one drop of water at a time. And yes, it's slow. Yes, it's boring. And yes, you won't even notice the difference tomorrow or the day after that, or you might a little bit. But then after a week, after 2 weeks, after a month, like, oh my God, so much has changed. And knowing that was so important for me as a lesson, I'm like, how can I create something that helps other people take advantage of that? And that's when it evolved for me a couple of years ago into the Insider membership. And instead of just giving someone a course, like, okay, just drink this in like a dog drinking out of a fire hose, which like all courses and like all memberships they just give you a library of all this stuff and say, okay, good luck. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So I came up with this membership where we cover 52 books a year in less than 5 minutes a day. And it's just one 5-minute video sent to you every Monday to Friday. And every 5 videos covers a different book. So instead of drinking out of a fire hose, you're now sipping a delicious cup of tea and able to enjoy it and get the nutrients and actually have some idea of how can I apply this to my life to make a difference. So that's where the last couple of years or so of my journey and focus have looked like.
There's a couple of things in there that I absolutely love. I think it's the patience that you've got to have, one drop at a time. And I think that's a beautiful analogy for also the consistency that we, as an entrepreneur, you really need to bring to your life. You know, you can't just expect, you know, a lot of people go on Instagram and post a few times and then disappointed if they're not getting any traction. But it's that, you know, constantly drip feeding your content, for example, and then eventually it will build up that bucket and it will become a lot richer, and you know, life looks different. But a lot of people are often expecting that, oh, I make the decision, I'm starting this journey now, I want to have turned around tomorrow. But that doesn't allow for long-term success or setting a great base from where you then can grow into exponentially and into wherever you want to grow. As when a lot of people want that short-term, quick, overnight success, but then they often fall afterwards because they haven't grown into the person they need to be to sustain that.
Right.
So I love that drip feeding, you know, becoming that person that can create, that can deliver, you know, great content and value to other people. And with that comes the richness and the long-term success.
Yeah, it's like, just imagine if you were able, you know, it's like people say, I want to read a book this month or whatever it is. You know, we all have a list of books or a stack of books that we haven't read, or we read it, but it takes forever to read it. Or then we don't remember what we read, or then we have no idea how to take action on it. So it's just like, imagine what it would be like if you read not just one book this year, but literally a book every single week for the entire year, 52 books, and every single one is giving you actionable takeaways and cheat sheets to remember it. It's just like, yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer that will lead to a change in your life.
And I've seen your videos, and they are so powerful because there's so much information and content packed into such a short time. It's like, okay, I've got it. And it sticks with you, because sometimes when you even listen to something for, you know, a course, for example, you remember what, 2-3 things. But if you do these small bits every day, you remember a good chunk of that small section rather than just small bits of a big chunk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So on this journey, I'm sure you have gone through many ups and downs, like we all do, the entrepreneurial roller coaster. What have been some of those challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest challenge that I have faced, or anybody will likely face, is internal and not external. And I was on a plane once and I had this insight. I thought back to a story of Tony Robbins that I heard. I was in a conference and he was speaking, and he was talking about the first seminar he ever gave was in Canada. And a few hours, he had a few hundred people sign up, and a few hours before the seminar, some agency comes to him and says, you don't have a license to be putting on this seminar, therefore you're going to have to cancel it. And what he did, he said, okay. And he rented a few buses, or however many buses, and told everybody that was going to the seminar to get on the bus. And they drove down the border to Washington State in the US, and they had the seminar there. And wow, the point of him saying this story was he was talking about the concept of threshold of control. That your threshold of control determines what is and isn't possible for you. You know, we all have areas, we all have boundaries where our emotions kick in and we feel like, okay, that's the limit of what is and isn't possible for us. So when I was sitting on that plane, I thought about that your emotional reactivity equals your threshold of control equals the size of your arena. So to the degree that you're emotionally reactive is the degree that in that area of life you have less control, and is the degree that in that area of life you are not able to play to the size that you'd like to play into. So for me, I think the biggest challenge that I face and I've been obsessing over more and more recently is, what are those patterns? What are those emotional reactivity triggers? What are those things that were up until now unconscious that I could make conscious that have been getting in the way? You know, so it's so interesting that we all live our life on repeat, and we think that we're living new experiences, but we don't realize that no, this is just the 100th time that we're reliving that same experience. So it's not like we're living a life of one thing after another after another. It's like, no, we're living the same life with the same relationship, with the same patterns, with the same barriers, with the same places we're getting stuck. And then we'll say, oh, this isn't for me. And we'll go to the next one. We'll start over. We'll be really motivated and do the same thing again and again and again and again.
Absolutely.
So that's been the biggest challenge and the most important thing for me to be aware of and realize that, okay, it's not just an external game, but an internal game. And when we talk about the idea of an internal game, it's not just about upgrading your mindset or thinking more positive thoughts, but that we have these emotions and energies and patterns that are not only stored in our minds, but also stored in our bodies. And how do we release them? How do we move past them? How do we, if they do exist, become aware of them and not feel like we need to be run by them? So there's just so much there that I find fascinating.
When you understand where thought comes from, where feeling comes from, where the source of that is, that just changes the full game, because then you're not reliant on your feeling. You can move forward with your business without saying, oh, today I don't feel like doing that, or the fear that comes up of, and all of us face that at some point or another, especially as the more you grow, the bigger the fear, because the more you're pushing the boundaries. So, but if you can recognize those emotional patterns and recognize where those feelings are coming from, and it's at the end of the day just all thought that we've created in our own minds, made up, it's a lot easier to move past them and seeing them for what they are, and just
and
our habits and our behaviors.
And I know this isn't even, we have so much to talk about reading, but just two things that I think will be very helpful for anybody, that have been very helpful for me, or that I found very interesting. One is, we have a feeling, and our instinct or intuition says that I need to get rid of this feeling, or I need to ignore it. Whereas when a feeling is there, the most powerful thing you can do is feel it deeply.
Go straight into it. Yeah.
And I've been, there's the Emotional Resolution Institute, I believe is called, amazing work they do with this concept. But the idea of feeling the sensations in your body is the way through it, and not trying to fight it or ignore it. And the other thing was the book that we're going to cover next week in the Insider membership is a book called The Genius Zone. And Gay Hendricks says in that book that,
I love that book.
Yeah, it's a great book. And he says that there are only two types of thoughts we can have: thoughts about things we can control, and thoughts about things we can't control. And he said that anytime you're unhappy, that is a sign that you're thinking about something that you cannot control. It's like, okay, wow, that's really interesting. But then it got more interesting when he said that one of the things that you cannot control are your emotions. We think that, okay, I have this emotion, I need to control it, I need to change it. So instead, when you recognize, say, okay, this is something that I cannot control, and then shift your focus, say, okay, let me think about instead something I can control and take action on that now. Okay, the feeling's there, but maybe I can't control taking a deep breath. Maybe I can't control taking that next step. Maybe I can control just getting into my senses. It's very freeing.
Oh, absolutely. And that is a lot of the work that I do with my clients as well. I'm specialized in mindset specifically, and then going into that, not letting I feel like this, I feel like that, determine the outcome of your life, because then you're constantly dependent on something that you can't control, which is not conducive to creating the success and the life that you want to have, that looks different to the life that you've had up until now. So it's awesome that you bring that up, and that you really bring it to the point as well. So now that you've gone through this whole external journey and internal journey, and especially at the beginning, you probably was doing one course at a time, and here and there, and doing all your reading. But when did you recognize that this was a really viable business and this was going to be a success and this was going to be your mission, purpose, and your life's journey?
I think it was ever since I published that second course on how to read 300 books a year. I posted it in a Facebook group and I was so nervous. The thoughts are like, oh, people are going to hate it. Oh my God, why did I do this? I wish I didn't do it. I should have taken longer to get into action. I should have thought about it more. And then I put in the group, and then the comments are just like, wow, this was amazing. This was like totally got me thinking of reading in a new way. And, there was someone who on this course platform already had a few 100,000 students and messaged me and says, hey man, I just wanted to let you know, I went through your course and I thought it was very, very powerful. And I was like, oh my God. So it was in that moment, I'm like, I feel like I feel different. I see myself differently than I did even just a few minutes ago. And I feel like I'm on a different path, or not even different, but a path that's more clear than it was just a little bit before I had published that post on Facebook.
That must have been such a great feeling.
It was so exciting. It was so exciting.
That's amazing. And what so from going from that point, so you've established, you've got a viable business here, something you're passionate about, something that you want to grow and really build in the long term. What do you think has made the biggest difference in the success of that?
I think for me, it's been thinking very little about the quote unquote success. I mean, of course, you have to think about it somewhat, but so much focus on the belief of my real experience of going into the dean's office and feeling so strongly that I was being, whether it's true or not, it was my feeling of being cheated by this college I was going to, with all of these things wrong with it. And I'm like, they don't care about their students. Again, whether it's true or not, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying my feelings about it. And so for me, it's just that sense of mission and that sense of joy that comes from being able to take hundreds of pages and make it accessible to someone in 5 minutes in a way they've never even thought about before. And even make it accessible to people at such a level that even if they can't read, or even if they have no interest in reading, or even if they're very young and can't read these complicated books, they're still able to take these concepts and live better lives as a result of it.
Amazing. So I think we can all agree that reading books is very important. And that's, really trains your mind, gives you new perspectives, opens you up to new ideas. But what's your perspective on why it is important to keep reading?
I think there are two reasons. One, and I was going to share this when we talk about reading, that an easy way to understand it is Will Smith said one of the two keys to life is reading. And forget about Will Smith saying it or somebody else saying it, but the reasoning behind it, he said, there is no problem that you could face that someone hasn't already mastered it and written about it in a book. So when you look at books as guides to be able to live a better life, to be able to live your dreams, to be able to make a bigger impact, to be able to move through the obstacles that have been getting in your way, it's a whole new world that gets opened up to you. That's one reason. And the second reason, kind of the hidden benefit of reading, is that to a large degree, the quality of your life is a reflection of, you could say, your vibrational level of thinking. It's kind of what Napoleon Hill talks about, and I actually have the book here. I've read it many times, Think and Grow Rich. And one hidden benefit of reading is when you're reading the right things that really interest you and that get you thinking about things in a new way, it raises you to higher vibrational level of thinking because it's stimulating your mind in a new way. So those are two reasons, kind of the main direct reason and then the indirect hidden reason to read.
I've got 2 points to the 2 points that you've just made. So the last one, the vibrational, I've experienced it so many times, and randomly often get spiritual experiences by reading like a very high vibrational book, lying by the pool with people, kids screaming around and people around. But I'm so in the book and that vibration. I can feel the vibration rising, and then it's like I have the best experiences. So it's not necessarily in the meditation. We all often believe that, you have your biggest insights or your biggest spiritual development during meditation, but I've actually had it in the most random places after reading an amazing book. So I absolutely love that you brought that up here. And the other thing, and I only just recognized that as you were saying it, I think books brought me onto this journey of what I'm doing now. About 10-15 years ago, I started reading all these books about mindset and about entrepreneurship. And at that point, I had no idea that was ever going to be my business, or I was ever going to make money doing that. But that opened me up to this whole world of mindset, I guess, and of personal development and of how you can improve yourself. And for many, many years, I just read a ton of books. And all that knowledge that I've built up then turned into doing courses, going on retreats, and kept increasing the interest in that field. But it gave me a great base and led me into it. So I never even thought about it, but it's so true, actually. So I'm sure you've gone through so many different books in terms of strategy and mindset and development and all types of topics. How has that influenced or shaped your business strategy and your business on a whole?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, of course, there are so many individual lessons from books that get to be applied directly. I think one of my favorite stories to share, when I was running the restaurant, we had somebody working there. He was kind of like a managerial role. And at the beginning, he was so motivated, but later on, you could just tell his interests were elsewhere. He had a temper would come out and just wasn't following through on the things that originally he was. So it was clearly time to part ways. But the question was, I don't know how old, 22, 23. And I'm like, how do I have this conversation? I've never done this before. So I read a book called Difficult Conversations, read it that day in the library, have the conversation with him that afternoon, applying the 3-step framework. And he quit and thanked me for the opportunity. We gave each other a hug, and it was a beautiful thing. And I haven't talked to him in many years, but I still think very highly of him. And, I assume he does of me as well, because there was something that I was able to learn and apply. So I think in terms of, that's not a strategy level, but it's a tactical level. I think in terms of tactics, there is so much that has come out of books for me in terms of what to apply. Even things that aren't clear meant to be lessons, but you read a book like Shoe Dog, where you realize, like, wow, building Nike, there's one guy that gets all the credit, but it was really a tribe. And reflecting, okay, how can I apply that? Even if it's just me in the business, how can I build a tribe? Realizing that it's impossible to do it without that. So just like a lot of different things that come about from these books that spur questions or need to get applied, or that along the way be like, okay, cool, that's a step up from what I was doing.
I love that. And especially, I think the more you read and the more information you get and absorb, the more you're able to pick and choose and kind of what resonates with you, and then applied it to your own, kind of make your own unique strategy from all this wealth of experience that you read through and go through. And there'll be things in a book that maybe 80% you didn't resonate with, but there was maybe 5-10% that you were like, oh, I love that idea, and with what I read over there, that could work great together. And you are the unique kind of common denominator that brings all of those bits and pieces together and creates their own puzzle of their own unique strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two things that are very helpful to do. One, when you reach something, ask yourself, how can I apply this? And then if you want to apply it, turn it into immediate action. Don't put it in a notebook for something to be able to, oh, now I can talk about this. Nobody cares that I can talk about it or you can talk about it or whatever, but that's not what we're here for. But the second thing is, I want to see if I can pull up the exact quote, because it's a great quote. Ralph Waldo Emerson yeah, I have it here. He said, make your own Bible.
Mm.
He said, select and collect all the words and sentences that in all your readings have been to you like the blast of a trumpet. So another practice that I really believe in is the concepts and the ideas and things that, and not every book will have concepts like this, most won't actually, but the things that really speak to you like the blast of a trumpet, put it
Mm.
together into your own personal Bible that you read every day in terms
That's
of the
great.
principles you want to live by, or the ways you want to act, or the decision-making rules, or, whatever it is.
That's such a great idea. Collating all the best bits and pieces that you've read.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, my last question, if you meet someone who's only just starting out on their entrepreneurial journey, what's your best advice that you would give them?
Yeah. I think something that I've been finding out more and more, and time will really tell, but that I believe in very much, is there is life at an intellectual level, and there's life at a more embodied, presence inspired level. And I think everybody talks about this intellectual level of life. Someone once told me, he said, life is about breadth and depth. And I took that to mean that breadth in terms of, knowing about a lot of things, but then depth in terms of who you are. How much of the bullshit of yourself have you let go of and stepped into who you really are? And I think that it's just so amazing when you feel like you're being guided. I know this sounds kind of weird or whatever, but when you have those senses of inspiration, or you have the thought where you don't feel like at an intellectual level, you need to control the whole entrepreneurial journey, but you know where you're going, you're already grateful for being where you're going, and you are open to the moment to moment inspirations and actions, and whatever those are, you take action on them.
That is a beautiful way of closing it. Just in the end of the day, it always comes down to taking action, but not necessarily forcing it, allowing it, and not having to know what it's actually going to look like in the end, but trusting that the next step is the right step, and just continuing consistently moving forward. And it all comes together in this beautiful journey that we're here to live out.
Yeah, we're not, Ken Robinson talked about this in a TED talk I saw in 2011. And I think it's something I've really only started to understand more over the last year. But he said the whole point of the school system is to train our mind, and not even our whole mind, but just really like the left side of the mind, as if the whole point of the body and everything else is just to transport half of our mind. And I think so much of all
Good
of
point.
yeah, and I think so much of all of the focus of how we live and what we think it means to be human, and what we think it means to succeed, is at an intellectual level. And what I'm learning, or really just what I feel like I've just opened the door of learning, but so much still to learn and explore, is that life is not an intellectual process. It doesn't need to be. And there's so much more to it that you'll rarely see all those motivational speakers talking about on Instagram. They'll talk about the very intellectual stuff, discipline, wake up early, which becomes yet another thing to think about or force yourself to do. But when you're able to step into this and explore this dimension of life, I think a real richness opens up for you by yourself, in relating with others, and in the work you're able to do and the impact you're able to make on people.
Absolutely. Amazing. I love everything that you've said, and I've taken a ton of notes for myself that I'm going to apply from now on. And you've also donated awesome gift for the audience. There will be a link right underneath this video where you can go and download it straight away. But do you want to tell us a little bit more about what it is?
Yeah, so there's so many things that I can share, but I've really learned over the years that the highest form of value that I can deliver to someone is through the insider membership. To take the wisdom from all of these books and make it accessible to literally anybody, whether they're 9 years old or they're 90 years old. And to do it every single day in 5 minutes a day, and to help people actually remember what they learn with the one-page cheat sheets, and by teaching through stories and analogies instead of facts and statistics, and by having a daily challenge every day with a way to apply it. So all of these things I've really found is the highest form of value I'm able to deliver to anybody at this point in my journey. And I've seen it because I get emails that I don't ask for all the time, being like, and I have them, many of them on my website, that say like, wow, this is changing my life, or I can't believe I joined, or this is way beyond anything I expected when I signed up. I thought it'd be just book summaries. So what I like to offer is I want for people to try it out. So to get your first book for free, and you can just see for yourself the tremendous value that this will bring to your life.
Well, I encourage everyone to go straight into the membership and just make the most of getting this incredible value delivered in 5 minutes a day that you would never be able to comprehend ourselves and get, distilled ourselves. So jump in, get your first book, but I would recommend just stay in the membership and get the most out of it. So thank you so much for taking the time of being part of the summit. And thank you to the audience to listen to this awesome talk. And I will see you soon.
Yeah, thank you.